Hey class, welcome to Estate Planning and Probate Law. I'm Tyler Melling, I'm your professor. I'm an estate planning attorney by trade, and I wrote this textbook while I was waiting on my bar exam results. So it's about 5 years ago or so. I've done a couple revisions since then, but what we're going to do is we're going to just have these lectures on the different chapters, and hopefully that'll provide some context to your projects. Feel free to text or email with questions. I prefer text. Yeah, we're going to go from there. So this video is about chapter 1. Oh, sorry, before I continue, I'm doing the YouTube format specifically so you have the ability to speed me up. I grew up in Texas, so I talk a little slower, I think, than most. So there should be a little gear, and you can make adjustments to speed me up or slow me down. Anyway, I think you can go up to double speed. So chapter 1 is about the introduction and definitions and things like that, affecting the entire probate code, right? So we're, rather than focusing on specific concepts, this is a really broad overview. There are a lot of new terms, so we're going to dive in. Okay, now probate is the word we use in law for the court process for disposing of property of incapacitated or deceased persons, right? So all of the probate code, we're dealing with people who have either lost the ability to manage their own finances through injury or illness, or they have passed away and we need to figure out what to do with their stuff. So there are 58 terms in the code. I copied some of them, and I'm going to just highlight the ones that are most important, right? So first of all, child. When we're talking about a child in the probate code, and we're using Utah's probate code in this case, a child is going to include biological children and adopted children. We are excluding any step or foster children, right? So, and this does not include other descendants, but so just keep in mind, we're including biological and adopted. We're not including step and foster, okay? Conservator, guardian is another one in there. Guardian and conservator are words that we often use together. The conservator word we use more with dealing with someone's property who, is the person who is managing the property for somebody who's become incapacitated, whereas the guardian is kind of their caregiver or protector of the person. So just keep in mind, conservator over the property, guardian over the person themselves. So making sure their medical needs are met, things like that. Okay. Let's see. There's a few others. Fiduciary. Okay. Fiduciary is a legal duty to act solely in the interests of another party. Okay, that's an important word to know when we're dealing with all the different types of roles in this in the probate code. When we're dealing with guardians, conservators, trustees, personal representatives, these are all things that can these are all fiduciary duties. So the fiduciary has to act in the best interests of the person they're taking care of, not in their own best interests. Okay. Instruments. When we're talking about instruments, we're talking about documents, right? So whether that's a trust, a deed, power of attorney form, it's the governing instrument is the tool that we're using at hand and the one that's going to take precedence over other instruments. Okay. Heirs. One thing that's interesting with heirs, a living person does not have heirs, right? We have presumptive heirs, but we don't know who the heirs are until the person dies. So Heirs are the people who will inherit an estate. Okay. Let's see. Incapacitated. When we're dealing with incapacity, this is the loss of a legal ability to manage your own finances, right? And there's a spectrum there. There's always a spectrum with these kinds of things. It's not always black and white. Just because someone's weird or has idiosyncrasies or may have a diminished capacity does not necessarily mean they become legally incapacitated. So we'll talk about that later in the course on when you have truly become incapacitated. Okay. Issue, when we talk about issue, this is usually some form of descendant. Okay. It's an old term for descendant. There's a few others in here. All right. Testator. Testator is a word. The feminine version is testatrix. It's because it's Latin, and that's the way endings work. But testator is someone who writes a will or executes a will. A testatrix, woman who executes a will. Likewise, the person who is supposed to execute the will and implement its will after the person has passed away used to be, and still is in some areas, executor or executrix, right? So testator, testatrix writes the will, and then the person carrying out their wishes, executor or executrix. We don't use, in Utah, the probate code uses the term personal representative instead of executor, okay? And then award, this is not an ecclesiastical congregation in the context of the probate code. We're talking about a person who needs a guardian, okay? So this is someone who's incapacitated, whether due to their legal age or their legal ability to manage their own finances. Okay. There's a few things, right? There's an effect of fraud and evasion. That's not going to be important for what we're dealing with. If you want to practice, we can talk about that later, right? Effect of the Consumer Price Index. Okay. The Utah Probate Code has certain dollar amounts that are adjusted to the Consumer Price Index. So if you were to type in Google CPI calculator, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, BLS, has a calculator for CPI. And in the calculator, you put in your base year. So in this year, the base year is 2009 is the probate code year, so that does not change unless the legislature changes it, right? And then we put in the amount that governs. So when we're talking about spousal shares, different things like that, we put in the amount that's in the code along with the base year of 2009. And then we see on that calculator, we can put in what is that worth in dollars in a future year. So we can put in the current year, we can put in the year that the person passed away. But the Consumer Price Index is administered by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and you can use that calculator to answer the questions on your project. Geographical reach, it governs the estates of people who were domiciled, meaning they lived in this state. Let's see what else. Sometimes Utah residents can be subject to it as well. And then we're not worried about alternative dispute resolution. So anyway, so that should be all the information you need to cover the Chapter 1 aspects of your project. Let me know if you have questions.